Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's SecurityBoulevard.com program, brought to you by Techstrong and CrowdStrike. My name is Cody J. Brown. I'm the host of Techstrong Learning, and we have an exciting panel ahead for you. First, I do need to cover just a couple of housekeeping notes. So today's session is being recorded. If you miss any of our discussion, or maybe you'd like to rewatch or share with a friend, the on-demand recording will be made available shortly after we conclude our live recording today. If you have any questions, we really hope that you do. We want you to send those in to us using the Q&A tab on the right side of your screen. Over on the right side of the screen, you'll see a couple more tabs. First one being the chat tab, and that's where we want you to get to know your fellow audience members. Let us know your thoughts throughout today's program, or maybe just from where you are tuning in. And if you navigate to the handouts panel, you'll find a couple of resources that our speakers have uploaded there for you. So feel free to download those at your own leisure. And of course, before we close out, we are giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So be sure to stick around for the duration of today's program. So our topic of discussion today is unleashing the value of all log data. And I'm joined by Arfan Sharif, Technical Marketing Engineer at CrowdStrike, and Mike Rothman, Chief Strategy Officer here at Techstrong Group and GM of Techstrong Research. So Arfan and Mike, thank you both so much for joining me today. I'm going to go ahead and let you take it from here.
Thank you, Cody. How are you guys doing today? Arfan, how are you?
Yep, really good. Thank you, Mike. Hope you're well too.
Welcome, everybody, to Unleashing the Value of All Log Data. What we're going to do today is really go through a recent study that Techstrong Research and CrowdStrike had partnered on, really to get a sense of where folks are relative to just their whole data collection environment. How are they leveraging their log data? To what degree are they collecting? What are some of the challenges that they have in terms of ensuring that they can aggregate and analyze pretty much everything that's happening in their systems? We'll get into observability a little bit. But first, I want to really get a little bit nostalgic up front, right? You know, I'm not a young guy. You may be able to tell that, from all the gray, although I was gray in my early 30s. So that notwithstanding. I remember back in the day when we had to aggregate a huge amount of data back in, it's Platinum. Thank you, Cody. But where we had to aggregate all of our log data in traditional relational databases, a lot of the early first generation security monitoring tools like SIM, again, they were very restrictive in terms of what I could send in there, how much data I could send in, that kind of response time that I needed from that standpoint. And it was tough. Right. I mean, we would put a bunch of data into systems. It would take 2 days to run, kind of the report on that front. Really hard to respond to security issues if it's taking, a couple of days to actually run some of the reports that are there. And then we kind of transitioned to a new set of backends, really kind of an updated concept of the SIM. And then the reality is we got into some cost issues, because to aggregate all of the data that we wanted to in order to analyze all of the systems that we were dealing with, we kind of had to mortgage the house, maybe even sell off one of the kids in terms of being able to support that kind of deployment model. And it's been challenging because I come from the school where more data is better than less data. That what we want to do is gather and aggregate all of the data that we can, because we're not sure when we're going to need it, right? Being a long time, 30 plus year security professional, I've kind of learned that once you don't capture the data, it's gone. Right. And now we've got all these systems, and we've got IT, I won't call it shadow IT, but business IT starting to build systems that are, kind of distributed within the whole environment. We've got all these cloud platforms that we're using in terms of being able to, again, deploy technology much faster and more effectively than we had in the past. And what that means is we're generating just a tremendous amount of additional telemetry that we should be able to leverage in some way, shape, or form. And again, we get back to that issue that it's expensive to, kind of put all this data into, one place. We have to start making choices about which environments will start to log from, right? And how we're going to leverage that data, how long we're going to keep that data. And in a lot of cases, whether it's a security use case or an observability use case, looking into some of the application performance and tracing capabilities, if we're not gathering that data, I think it is, ultimately problematic. So I yearn for the day, right, when we could put whatever data we want in whatever system we want and be able to analyze that, really as we need to. So that's kind of a compelling vision that I have for the world. Arfan, is that kind of in alignment with how you see the world?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say organizations in today's day and age are bringing in terabytes worth of data from all of the infrastructure. So it could be networks, firewalls, endpoints, you name it. Customers want to bring this data in. So the challenge they often find themselves having is how can they scale so that their log management operation really needs to scale effectively without worrying about costs from both an infrastructure and also licensing perspective. So as well as planning for growth due to the speed with which data grows at today's a day and age, log management is a really big area. It's quite diverse due to the types of data that customers actually want to work with. And then you touched on it already, the use cases that can be achieved with this type of data. For example, if we just take an example of a web server log or an access log, if you look at it from a number of different perspectives, you can find value in that data for both, DevOps use cases, IT operations, as well as security. So, yeah, your introductory comments are really spot on. And it's definitely a field which is diverse. And, there's a lot of customers facing challenges around bringing in various types of data.
You bet. And the other thing I didn't necessarily dig into as much, and we'll cover all this stuff, over and over again, Arfan, because, we want to make sure that everybody kind of gets it from that standpoint. But, it's also a matter of performance too, right? And a lot of the early systems, even some of the modern systems, right, they're not necessarily built to handle terabytes of data, coming and being ingested, day in and day out, right? How do I, gather that data? How do I do the analysis on that data, at that scale continues to be a huge challenge for a lot of platforms and really a lot of the customers that are trying to use those platforms. So without further ado, let's kind of dive into the data, right? So what we did as part of the pulse meter process, we built a pulse meter for CrowdStrike, and it's in the handout section. So if you wanted to just click over there, you could take a look at it. We'll excerpt quite a bit of the data from that study as we go through today's talk. But what we did is we polled our audience, right? So Techstrong Group, DevOps.com and Security Boulevard, Container Journal, Digital CXO. We ran a poll on the website, which asked a number of different questions. And the first question that we asked was, do you capture, store, and analyze all of your log data, right? And this is what the results show. The 26% said no, only select logs. So those are the folks that basically have to make choices. They're not aggregating all of their data for whatever reason. 22% says yes, but the logs are stored in different places. So they're not aggregating all of those environments. Maybe they have, different, SIMs for different business units. Maybe they think about, observability or APM data differently than they do security data. And they've got different tools and different platforms that are leveraging and aggregating and doing analysis on that data. 33% say yes, all logs are stored on a central platform, which I think is promising, but we'll dig into that in a minute. And 19% say not sure. Different teams handle logging. So again, whether it's different teams handling logging, whether it's logs stored in different places, right? You've got, I'm not too good at math, right? 41% that basically aren't aggregating data. You've got another 26% that are basically saying that they've got to make choices, right? Difficult choices about what to collect and what not to collect on that front. And about a third are kind of doing what we would call the best practice, which is to store all the logs in a central platform. But again, we're not clear on the scale. We don't know, what kind of data and really what analytics they're doing on top of that data. So I think that's pretty representative for what, I see in my discussions with folks. Nobody really argues with me and says, my gathering all that data is just a crappy idea, and I really don't want to do that every day. So I don't really have that discussion. We usually have a political discussion, which says, I just can't get everybody on the same page, or I can't, find a tool that's going to allow me to, do what I need to do. So that, again, hits the different teams are handling it. That's really a political issue when you get down to it. You have a technology issue, which is, only select logs on that front or in different places. So, our front, is that consistent with the discussions that you're having with customers day in and day out?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I were to touch on some of these responses, so I would say the highest response, which is yes, all logs are being stored in a central platform. This is something we suggest for a number of reasons. So it could be compliance, it could be investigating incidents. We often have this discussion with our customers and prospects, some of who are not bringing in all of their data. And although they're not bringing in all their data, they realize the value of bringing in all their data, because they often come across situations where during investigations, they feel that having more data from a particular data source really helps them to increase the speed of the investigation. Now, the second highest was really around selected logs. And in this case, most organizations really look to prioritize the data that they bring into a log management solution. So this really depends on the importance of the platform, network, or service that they're logging data from. And often organizations have limited budgets to bring in data from all of the data sources, hence the prioritization. And then if we think about logs are stored in different places. So from that response, you can see that organizations often use various solutions to store some of the data. So this could be potentially outside the remit of log management. It could also be across various storage mediums. And then I guess lastly, 19% different teams handle logging. So I guess there's not a huge amount of context on this, but even if you consider a log management operation with a number of different teams handling different data, it often is in relation to teams that work with their logs or data in silos, such as IT and security being split up into various areas. And this has its own challenges. So as there's often minimal communication between teams, they don't often share the data that they could do, and they could be utilizing different solutions, which could mean a number of different skill sets. So there's always benefits in using a single platform, as then the organization doesn't need to worry about skills gaps or enablement as such. And most of the time, the reason for multiple solutions is that you'll have people coming into the organization who have a particular preference, or they use capabilities or features of one tool or another. And many organizations often leverage many tools depending on use cases, requirements, and also personal preference. So whether from a business perspective, it often makes sense to reduce the number of vendors due to the costs and complexity it adds.
You bet. So there's leverage, right? And we can get leverage both in terms of, kind of how we access the data, but also cost leverage, when we're able to aggregate solutions across a variety of different kind of custom or, use cases on that front. I want to dig into the political side of it a little bit too, because again, you're working with customers every day, kind of is your main contact within these environments. Is it someone within security? Is it IT? Could it be both depending on the specific customer? How difficult is it to get these folks on the same page that they, that there's knowledge and insight to be gained if they can aggregate all of that data into the same place?
Yeah, absolutely. So most of the time we're working with a particular requirement the customer has, and that customer could be looking at to meet a use case around security or IT operations. And most of the time there's other solutions used by other departments within that organization. And there often won't be too much communication. The renewal period will be completely different for both solutions, and the use cases and the data that they handle will always be different as well. So it's always interesting to look at it from that perspective.
Yeah, and that's been my experience as well, is that you know most of the time if you can get everybody in the same room, right, talking about how to solve a specific problem together, magic happens, right? And again, it's kind of pretty intuitive. It's like, wow, we're all on the same team. We don't need to be fighting about where we store our data or what it is that we do with it. You know, we're all trying to isolate, which is really to get our questions answered from the data that we're gathering. And that's really kind of what we want to stay focused on. And again, you know, and that's a lot of the softer issues where for a long time it was a technical impediment to really aggregating all the data we wanted to be able to analyze it at the scale that we wanted to. Now, in a lot of cases, it can become cultural and or political, which again is a challenge for me, right? I mean, because I'm just, you know, which is probably why I've had, you know, only I work in small groups, right? So Techstrong is pretty small group that we work on. You know, I can't work in big companies because I'm kind of the bull in the china shop, right? I'll be like, this is kind of stupid. Why aren't we doing it this way? And then they go, thanks for playing, Mike. You know, we're going to pay you for a little while not to come to work. So, you know, again, I just get frustrated by the fact that we can't get on the same page. We can't, you know, kind of really break down a lot of those silos. And that means we can't really leverage the data to the degree that we need to. All right. So what is our next question here? What would be the top benefit of capturing, analyzing, and being able to query all of our log data? So we have 36% say enhanced visibility, right? 27% say improved security posture, 19% more context to alerts, and 18% improve response time. By the way, all of those are pretty good outcomes, right? Whether, you know, we can see everything that's happening in our environment, improving our security posture, right? Having more context, improving response time. Again, all of those are good, you know, kind of situations that we want to be in. Anything jump out at you about, you know, kind of the specific perspectives of the whole?
I'd say I generally agree with most of that, to be honest. Like you mentioned, all of them are really good outcomes and generally what customers are looking for. So it all makes sense from a response perspective. Even the split is quite even. So if you think about enhanced visibility, essentially it means having an understanding of what's happening across all of your data, whether it's from security, IT ops, or DevOps, as well as you know, the underlying data sources that are feeding into the use cases. So that will make sense. Obviously, the more visibility you have, the more you can do with your data, and obviously you have a better understanding across all areas. In terms of improving security posture, so organizations are essentially bringing in data from security, and it helps visibility. And as we know, security is quite a large area. So one has to really consider the various aspects of security, whether it's endpoint detection, network identity access, and even cloud. And then in terms of context to alerts, so most log management solutions will allow you to kind of trigger alerts based on requirements. And the more context you add, you know, the more value you're going to get from your data, and the more visibility you have. So if you're bringing in multiple sources of data, you have the ability to correlate this and understand more about what led to the incident, whether it was a sequence of events or whether it's about gaining access from someone's trying to gain access from a compromised host. So it certainly helps you with more context and becoming more proactive. And then lastly, you know, improving response time. This is something that speaks for itself. A lot of organizations are measuring things like mean time to detection and mean time to resolution. So again, that's a really important factor.
Yeah, and as we move into an application-centric or observability type of use case, you know, a lot of these organizations set service level objectives in terms of how quickly they expect to respond. And again, not having all of the data at your fingertips to be able to, you know, analyze and work through a lot of these issues is, you know, going to clearly be, you know, somewhat constraining from that standpoint. So I'll echo a lot of what Arfan just, you know, kind of went through. I do pick a little bit of a bone with, you know, so improved security posture is a little bit more complicated than just looking at, you know, kind of your data, right? So I love the other three from my standpoint, right? enhanced visibility. We've got to have it. If you can't see it, you can't protect it, right? You can't manage it. Obviously, more context to alerts, being able to, really kind of mine through that data and understand, what it means more effectively, improved response time, and improved security posture. Again, those are, I'd say, second level benefits to being able to look at all of your data. You still got to do stuff, right? So, in order to improve your security posture, you actually have to do stuff. You have to protect things. So that doesn't just happen automatically, but it's enabled by a broader collection of your data. It's facilitated by being able to do higher level analytics on, kind of a broader data set. Same thing with response time. Having that data at our disposal gives us the ability to look at that more effectively, again, faster. So, the first two are very clearly direct, kind of impacts of gathering all your log data. The other two are second level, but all the same. Honestly, I'm happy that folks see any of these things as benefits, because what we're trying to do is really make the case and continue to make the case for why it's absolutely critical to continue to aggregate that data, to leverage it within a single platform, to be able to do advanced analytics on that data and ensure that we are, again, just leveraging the resources that we have at our disposal. And I do like to, kind of practice empathy every so often. My therapist has been working on that with me. No, I'm just kidding. But, it's really put yourself in the position of the responder. Right. These folks don't really understand what, is going on. They've got this thing. They think it may be problematic. It could be an application performance issue. It could be some kind of latency problem. It could be a potential attack. Right. What do I start with? How do I do things? Where do I go next? What should I look for? That's the art of response. That's the art of troubleshooting. And again, having to work within a variety of different platforms, not really having the ability to do the analytics and the searching at the speed that you need to, that all constrains the responder's ability to be able to do their job. Right. So again, part of why I'm so, kind of vociferously, beating the drum for, bigger log aggregation. It's not because my pals at CrowdStrike are my friends, and they are, right. Because I think it's the right thing to do, for customers. I think it's the right thing to do for everybody that's on the call today, because it will make a lot of those operational motions that you struggle with day in and day out easier. Won't solve the problem, right? Still got to do the work, but it makes it easier if you have that platform for data. So I guess I should get off the soapbox a little bit now, Arfan, and maybe move on. But again, I get passionate about this stuff because I've struggled with it for so long, worked with so many customers that had so many problems, really troubleshooting their environment. We've got these tools today that help us do it better. And we get mired in, again, whether it's politics, organizational issues, or silos, or limited budgets, or what have you. And it just irritates me, right? So that's my irritation coming through. All right. What is the next question that we have? The biggest challenge. Oh, wait, hold on. We did get a question coming off. So let's take maybe a minute or two break. We had a question come in. What are the commonly, thank you. Gosh, Cody, come in right with the questions. There's my man. So what are the commonly used tools used for storing and analyzing the log data? You have some ideas there, Arfan?
So there's a number of leading vendors in this space. So CrowdStrike obviously being one of them, have a solution called LogScale. And then there's a number of other vendors who've been in the market for a while, such as Splunk and Elastic and a few of the others. So yeah, there's a number of leading vendors in that area.
Yeah, I guess I would answer that question really by categorizing the types of solutions that you have, right? And I kind of described them before. You had your first generation of, kind of SIM or security event and information monitoring or management, depending on what acronym you decide to use on that. Excuse me. And you had those tools. Those were kind of like the ARC sites, and McAfee had a tool that did that. IBM, QRadar, and a lot of those tools, at least back 10, 15 years ago, really had that underlying relational database that was there. So you would pump stuff into Oracle or whatever it was, Postgres or whatever was the underlying kind of relational database. Obviously, you had ingestion challenges because there's only so much you can pump into an RDBMS at any given time. You had searching challenges. If you needed to change the schema, that was absolutely brutal. In fact, you couldn't do it. It was kind of like a brain transplant. So those were kind of limited. We moved to a second generation, which was really more structured around a more flexible, purpose-built backend. So it was really flat files and indexing flat files on top of that. That was, again, that was the second generation of QRadar. That was Splunk. Logarithm came in with kind of a model that looked like that. And again, those were good until they weren't, right? And when we started, really aggregating a bunch of observability data, when we started really aggregating a lot of cloud telemetry, moving a lot of the data, back and forth became problematic in those use cases. And then what we've moved to, kind of today, and again, CrowdStrike's platform is, kind of indicative of this, is really just a different data model. It's called, basically index on query. So as opposed to indexing on ingestion, we've got to do a whole bunch of compute and analysis as we're ingesting the data. We actually wait until we ask questions, so we can pump just a tremendous amount more data into the backend platform. A lot of the, kind of housekeeping that happens can happen in, kind of, as a process on the side of the ingestion. So, you're able to distribute it. And because it's a cloud delivered platform, right? You don't have to worry about storage. You don't have to worry about running out of capacity. You don't have to worry about, upgrading boxes. That becomes, the vendor's problem on that front. So it's really about deciding which generation of tool you want to use to solve your specific use cases. But, all the monitoring platforms, whether they come from a security environment or they come from an observability, kind of background, kind of had that, progression, although we called observability APM, right, or application performance management for a long time. But they all had that same progression of back-end data resources because, now it's kind of the state of the art in data management. And we've really been able to leverage a lot of the advances in storage and analytics technology in order to make a lot of these platforms much more scalable, much more effective, honestly, much more costly or cost effective from that standpoint in terms of how much data we can actually ingest and analyze at any given point. Did I miss anything there, Arfan? I mean, I'm a bit of a historian, but
you summarized it really well. So obviously you mentioned the second and obviously now the third generation of these solutions, which includes CrowdStrike, Falcon LogScale, and really when it came to designing the solution, it was about making sure that the performance challenges that were seen across the second generation solutions, they aren't in this latest solution, and the fact that you can bring in data really, at high speed and vast amounts of data, and then be able to query that data is something that's a big advantage to customers who are obviously working with more and more data in today's day and age.
Good. Okay, I guess we should get back to our challenges here, right? What are the biggest challenges with your current log system? And I guess I kind of described a number of them already, right? 34%, the complexity of the tool, right? How am I going to use that? How am I going to manage it? How am I going to scale it out? How am I going to get my data in? So ingestion and connectors and all of that kind of fun stuff, right? 28%, costs are too high. Yeah, nobody's ever kind of said, well, gosh, I come into work today and I'd like to spend more money, right, on my monitoring platform, right? Said by nobody ever. So, obviously costs continue to force a lot of those tough choices that we were referring to this morning. 20% too slow, not real time. So I can't get the information out that I need to. I can't leverage the data that I'm aggregating in a timely fashion to be able to really impact my operations. And 18% says, lacks scalability. And that's really a technical financial limitations. So they would really want to aggregate more data. They just can't. And I see a lot of that with, kind of the second generation tools that are out there. They just fall over, right? I mean, you've got enough data in there. You start trying to do searches, it comes down, the performance comes down. You're trying to do analytics and, they just can't handle the amount of inflow of data that we see there. So that tends to be the challenges. Agree with, kind of all of those on that front. It is interesting to me, and love your opinion on this, Arfan. The complexity thing ranked, kind of the highest because, ingest data, analyze data, draw a conclusion. What's so tough about that, right? But, the complexity of these systems is, and you think that's operational complexity? Do you think that's, kind of usage complexity where it's hard to, answer or ask the questions in a way that makes sense to folks?
Yeah, I'd love to be able to drill down into that and find out exactly what about complexity, because obviously complexity is the front runner here. Some of the other areas are something we often hear from customers when discussing their challenges with log management solutions. But if we just focus on complexity, and just to give you some more context, I'm just going to share my screen. And just let me know when you can see this slide.
We can see it. Perfect.
Excellent. Okay. So obviously, when it comes to log management, it's quite a big area. This visualization on the right-hand side, this covers each of the areas of log management. So, how do you collect the data? What methods do you use? Do you use a log shipper, or do you use another method? What type of data are you picking up? Are you working with syslog? And how are you bringing that data? Are you extracting the relevant data at the source where the data is being collected, or are you doing that when that comes into the platform? And then you've got other areas such as log aggregation itself. So obviously this relates to the pipeline itself. You collect logs from the needed sources, you buffer the logs in case there's any network or throughput issues, and then you pass the logs to transform them into the format that can be processed. You then have the log search and analysis. So once data is stored, your aggregated log files are now searchable, and typically through a structured query language. Log analysis can be more than just search, though. So even while troubleshooting, it's often useful to be able to visualize the breakdown of the data, and who's going to be looking at the data, which teams are they going to be working, what type of are there spikes, the traffic volume, number of errors per host. So there's so much to kind of look at and analyze, and then we move on to log monitoring and alerting. So this is there's constantly we're constantly provided with information about how systems and applications are performing. It also keeps you informed whether your infrastructure is working normally or if there's any anomalies. And a key part of this process is that it allows you to set up rules and alerts so the right teams can be notified. And then last but not least, there's also the log visualization and reporting. So all team members, cross-functional team members should have access to the same information, so everyone's on the same page. And reports and visualizations really make everything that happens behind the scenes accessible to everyone, including people outside the team. So you should be able to share that out to other people within the business. When building reports for business stakeholders, they should be able to have a look at trends over time. So really having a clear picture of what's happening across the data, regardless of the data source, that's an area. So yeah, just going back to the slide, and I'll stop sharing for now. If we just go back to the slides, excellent. So that was just really to kind of elaborate on the complexity and the areas of complexity, because it is it's a diverse area. There's lots happening in the background. So that's one of the reasons I can appreciate more about the complexity of the tool itself.
You bet. And it's really the complexity of the job, right? And we don't want to, kind of underlie that. And really there are two use cases or two main, kind of environments that you described in the life cycle, right? There's the response, and kind of that's, oh my God, something's happening. I got to figure out what it is. I've got to, unpack it. I've got to understand what the root causes are and what my real exposure is from that standpoint. And then you kind of have the reporting or the documentation of the artifact side of it too. And a lot of folks don't really consider that because it's not necessarily real time from that perspective. But again, without the ability to, aggregate all of the data from a variety of your different places, you've got specific limitations that you've got to deal with in that environment. So again, we want to make sure that folks understand it's both the real time, right? Be able to search through just scads of data, mine it for analytics, leverage and integrate, enrich it with other, data sources that were there. But it's also a lot of the, hey, what is it that we've been doing, right? That trending analysis, that insight analysis, being able to, again, have a platform that allows us to, really do advanced analytics on that, kind of data aggregation or data lake, as we're starting to call it, the security data lake. That sounds restful, Arfan, doesn't it? I'm just going to go down to the security data lake and hang out a little bit, maybe fish a bit, kind of don't worry about the day-to-day stuff on my phone, banging at me. Of course, that's not necessarily the case, but that's my visualization of it. So I kind of like that on that front. But, back to the point is that, complexity continues, and will be, a challenge because our underlying systems continue to be complex. And what we want from our tools is the ability to simplify a number of those things in a way that is, again, cost effective and scalable to the degree that we need it. So I think, kind of our little challenges there really do illuminate, exactly the problems that folks are struggling with today. All right, what else do we have here? Our next one. What is holding you back from capturing and analyzing more of your log data? So 27% costs too expensive, right? 24% data complexity, 7% our tools can't scale, and the big winner today, right? All of the above, because as we've kind of gone into, there are lots of challenges in doing this. So again, I want to put you on the spot here, Arfan, right? You're here. Let's put you on the spot a little bit, relative to how do you guys grapple with, kind of all of these issues, right? The cost issue, the complexity issue, the scale issue. I'll give you a little bit of a form, right? Talk about, kind of how the log scale platform is really able to, kind of address a lot of these issues and challenges that folks are facing.
Sure, of course. And I guess let's just start with the cost one, because that's probably the highest amongst the other three. And cost really ties up with one of the questions that we came across earlier. So obviously organizations capturing and storing all of their data, and the challenges around cost often relate to two things. So firstly, the cost and the budget, where the organization's paying for a solution based on ingest. They often have a set budget which can be used against data sources, which they prioritize based on business needs and requirements. And this limits them to potentially bring in other types of data, which can also be valuable for an organization because it might help complement the first use case. Now, the second aspect when it comes to cost is actually the deployment. So log management solutions often need a fair amount of planning because they involve a number of different areas. And these areas often include the collection of data, formatting, extracting the relevant information, searching across it, building visualizations and reports, as we've discussed. So getting value from that data and then storing the data, you can retrieve the necessary information as quickly as possible. And I guess that's the goal. But now going back to the design, you need to consider how much data you're going to bring into the platform and how you're going to bring it in. And then you need to decide how long you're going to retain that data for within the platform. So there's a level of planning in determining how much infrastructure is going to be needed and how much storage is going to be needed. And also going back to the question about capturing and analyzing your data, you need to build a scalable architecture that involves costs based on the number of users accessing the platform and the amount of data that you're bringing in. So again, you have to factor in cost of deployment, how easy it is to scale. And if you consider the growth of data in today's day and age, ideally you have to plan for that, and often a few years ahead. So one way organizations can alleviate the need for designing and building their own architectures by utilizing SaaS offerings. which logging vendors such as LogScale offer. And when they choose this option, they still need to consider how much data they're bringing in, but they don't need to worry about the scalability concerns. Now, you obviously had an interesting question about how LogScale can help with the factor around infrastructure and scale. If we look at LogScale and the way it's been designed and architected, we certainly need much less infrastructure than many of the other vendors out there. So we can bring in terabytes worth of data with, let's say, 10 to 20% of the infrastructure needed. And that's really down to the way the architecture's been built and designed. One other factor, so I touched on storage and how much data comes in, and essentially it needs to be, if we bring in masses of data, we need to be able to search it quickly, and it needs to be in a compressed format. LogScale's also known to heavily compress the data coming into the platform as well. So that's something else which puts LogScale at an advantage. Now, one other thing regarding data complexity is that there's an aspect which ties into data complexity, which is quite high in the responses. So most organizations understand the value of logging. However, at times they're faced with resource challenges. So we already discussed the various processes on the last slide and how complex it can be. And this often needs organizations to get help with regards to expertise. And having that in-house can be a challenge. So having all the, having experts on board within an organization, not all organizations are in that position. So at that stage, it's really worth considering a vendor and an organization who can offer a managed service to help cover the expertise and fill some of the gaps. So hopefully that gives a bit more context around some of the responses and how LogScale also helps.
It does that. So thanks for that. And again, we didn't even touch on, kind of the human factors here, right? We've been really spending like, hey, we've got this platform. How do we leverage this platform? How do we scale this thing up? But that's a key aspect of this, right? All the data in the world aggregated in the fanciest thing doesn't really help you if you don't have folks that can interpret that, understand how to leverage that data, really, kind of be able to factor in the use of that data to impact operations. So, the idea of a managed provider, is certainly very helpful when you don't have the skills in-house to be able to do a number of those things. So that's something that, they're called MDR vendors now, right? Or managed detection and response. But these are the folks that, kind of have their own infrastructure, or else they leverage some of the stuff that you have in order to, again, just supplement your internal resources with both, threat intelligence, curated kind of detection environments, as well as the ability to start doing the front end of, the investigation to validate and verify whether, some of those alerts are legit, threats.
So Mike, just to touch on that as well. So last week we had our user conference known as Falcon in Vegas.
Falcon. And your product's called Falcon, so I think that's cute, right? FAL.con.
And we actually launched our offering when it comes to managed services and helping customers work with use cases in their data. So just kind of touch on that.
Yeah, no, and again, it's hitting the need, right? We talk about the staff shortage and the skills gap and all of those things in security, and they're a thing, right? We can't, we've lost that battle. We can't find enough people, so we've got to leverage both the capabilities of the tools that we have at our disposal, as well as ensuring that we can get the support from other organizations as need be. So we've probably beaten that one to death a little bit. Let's kind of talk, let's think about things in terms of a little bit of future. Where are we going, kind of in the future with a bunch of these different platforms? We asked two other questions, right? Have you implemented a strategy for aggregating the logs from your Kubernetes, microservices, and cloud native environments? 40%. Basically at no current plans, 26% yes, 24% on our roadmap, and 11% are in some stage of prototyping. So what this question gets to is really kind of something that we track on our container journal. editorial site, as well as do a bunch of Techstrong research around this topic. But that is, kind of the advent and momentum behind cloud native infrastructure, right? So whether it's open source stuff like Kubernetes or a variety of other different platforms relating to container orchestration, whether it's leveraging open source capabilities to run your continuous integration, continuous deployment pipelines for how you manage, kind of code and software development within your environment. There's just really, in effect, a revolution going on relative to how a lot of these platforms and how technology is really being developed and deployed here. So what we wanted to get to was, how many of you folks are actually starting to think about, kind of logging from these different environments? Because I can tell you, you move towards containers, right? You move towards cloud native infrastructure, and it generates a crap ton more telemetry than what we had to do, kind of before with our, fairly concrete, discrete devices on that front. So it's kind of interesting that, we're still very early in that market, but I can tell you this is going to strain the system. So a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about thus far in terms of, just constraints on how much data you can, cost effectively manage and analyze, we're going to turn it to 11. Right, to use a Spinal Tap analogy there, because once we start really integrating some of the application infrastructure into our logging platform, again, we're really going to start to see the cracks in the existing generation of monitoring platforms, and that's really going to make, I think, a pretty compelling case for these newfangled solutions like LogScale. Any comments on that, Arfan?
Yeah, I think. Just to echo what you've mentioned, and also to suggest I kind of agree with that. Although 40% seems quite high for no current plans, we're certainly seeing a lot of customers who are looking to kind of take things to the cloud and go through digital transformation projects and kind of containerize their applications as such. So yeah, generally I'd agree with the responses on there where customers are looking to plan, but it does seem to have slowed down a bit. So yeah, it does make sense.
Yep. And the other one is, has your organization started or considered its journey towards observability? And what we had here is, we had 30%, basically saying observability, what's that? So they're not familiar with the term. Maybe they're security folks, right? If you're in cloud native or you're in DevOps, you certainly are fairly familiar with the observability term. 36% say they have partial observability from that standpoint, 24% actively planning for the journey, and 18% say they've achieved full observability. And it's kind of interesting because we started the discussion, or at least one of the early places that we got to was, some of the internal silos that you have within organizations, some of the cultural and political challenges that you may have in terms of really leveraging, kind of data across a number of these different use cases. And again, what I want to highlight here is, if you thought we had issues before, just wait, right? Because observability kind of it really forces a lot of different groups to really kind of come together and work collaboratively. That's kind of what DevOps is all about, right? Kind of breaking down the silos, removing a lot of the, friction between, the development, the security, and the operations group. I guess that would be DevSecOps within that context. Observability is really kind of the common data environment that we use in order to, manage, troubleshoot, and investigate what's happening within our environment. So that's certainly something to keep an eye on. Arfan, of the folks you're working with, how many tend to be from application DevOps type use cases versus security? I mean, I know CrowdStrike, its heritage is a security company. So have you guys, really started dipping your toe in the observability waters yet? Or are you guys still pretty early into that space?
Yeah, so I would say historically LogScale customers have been focused on observability, and then obviously the trend with security, because the platform allows you to bring in any type of data and search across it. I would say 50-50 approximately. So yeah, we do see use cases around observability. And I guess one of the things that's interesting regarding the responses here is about we have partial observability. So I guess the objectives of observability are basically to get reliability, security, and compliance and revenue growth overall. But then if you think about customers or prospects looking to get partial observability, I guess this assumes that because observability is split into three different areas, if you think about logs, metrics, and traces, that means that they're part of the way there, or they're looking to get part of the way there with either logs and metrics. So that's something that was quite interesting on this particular response.
Yeah, you bet. And again, I'm still curious about, where are the folks that have never heard the term observability? I mean, wherever that is, that must be a nice place, because, I hear it everywhere, but maybe that's just, kind of the folks that I hang out with from that perspective. But it is going to be something that we all have to, start paying attention to. And again, the point here is, it really is about collaborating across the entire organization and putting in place a platform that enables us to really sing off of the same hymn sheet, or whatever vernacular you want to use from that perspective. Because again, we've just spent so many years in an environment where we couldn't see the entirety of our systems, right? Because of technical limitations, sometimes because of cultural limitations. And we're moving past that, where again, starting to integrate a lot of the, kind of application level data and information that we've had and had been the purview of, kind of the ops team. We're starting to be able to leverage that within the context of, the security use case. And I think that, again, to me, it's all good from, kind of a progress standpoint, but we still got to do the work. Right. And we have to start moving, to some of these more advanced platforms to start to allow us to unlock the value of the data that's within our environment. Yeah, I liken it to the early days of business intelligence, right? You had organizations that, kind of had data all over the place relative to the performance of their business, right? So this wasn't a technology thing, and the data warehouse, or the first versions of the data warehouses, allowed organizations to centralize that data, to aggregate it, to start to do very interesting analytics on that data, to draw some conclusions about how their business should operate. Right. And it really was a revolution in business management to be able to access and utilize kind of that data from across the entire environment. And we see the manifestations of that, right? When you want to get a hotel room and it costs $500 a night, well, that's because somebody's leveraging data across their environment and doing a bunch of yield management, saying, I got a whole mess of folks and there's a constrained supply, so I'm going to jack up the price. So that's the manifestation of that. What we're doing is we're moving in a similar direction from an IT standpoint, giving us the ability to leverage data from a lot of different environments and do analytics and really find patterns that we didn't know were there because we couldn't look at a common data stream. So to me, again, being an old guy, right, that's very exciting to me, because we always struggled with trying to figure out, situational awareness or what was happening within our environment. And now we're at the precipice of really being able to, unlock just a number of different insights about kind of the operations of our IT environment that we never could before. And to me, that's very, very exciting. Nothing, Arfon. Yeah, I'm on the soapbox again.
Yeah, no, I guess the, one important thing, and you kind of mentioned that as well, is that the, environments are growing more and more complex, and not every organization is really addressing the increased number of issues that are arising. So without an observable system, the cause of problems is really unknown, and there really isn't a standard starting point as such. So I can appreciate your what you mentioned.
So the good news is we've already had our panel discussion. That's what we've been doing the whole time. So I don't, we just kind of put that placeholder in case we missed anything. So if anybody has any questions, happy to answer some. Oh, we got a Q&A. We got somebody with a question. All right. How does log scale? Cody may be able to pull this one up, but I'll read it. How does log, way ahead of me, right? How does it handle log retention? Can users control their own log retention per log, for example? Is a configuration UI available? So you're going to have to handle this one, my friend. That's not something that I really know.
Yeah, so the answer is yes, absolutely. So users can control the log retention. It's normally done per data source, and it's definitely configurable in the UI. And you often have data sources coming into repositories, and then you can have retention based on that repository.
Yep, great. Any other questions from anybody out there? No, I guess we should start to wrap stuff up. So following the webinar, you will get, and it's actually up there now. So if you go into the handouts section, you can, kind of pull down. There is a version of the pulse meter. It is all of this data that's there that we've talked about through our little chat this morning or afternoon, depending on where you are, or in perpetuity, right? Because we're going to archive this. So we've hit on a lot of these things, but there is some, context and some commentary that goes along with the pulse meter. So definitely check that out. And you'll get a link to the recording as well. And any parting shots, Arfan, before I wrap things up, and then we'll go to the next one. I want to talk about an event that we have coming up.
No, I mean, I just like to thank everyone for joining, and also appreciate you hosting this as well. So thank you very much.
Yeah, you bet. It's been a fun conversation. And again, I like to, get nostalgic at times, but I really am genuinely excited about kind of where we're at from a technology standpoint, and really the opportunities that we have to, again, more effectively leverage this data that we've just been, again, waiting around to generate a report for our auditor to show up, to be able to use these things operationally, both on the observability side as well as the security side, is incredibly exciting to a guy like me. So before I hand it back over to Cody to really wrap things up, just want to mention our DevOps Experience conference that is happening on November 16th. So you can go to that link and sign up. Going to be a fun time. And really, we think about things in terms of the future. And the theme this year is to the edge and beyond. We're starting to see a lot of activity in terms of moving workloads, to an edge platform to help get closer to the user, and really leveraging kind of DevOps techniques in order to, manage that code. And if anything, that's good news for you, Arfan, right? Because that means more data out closer to there. We have to aggregate that somewhere. And that, again, makes another case for a modern aggregation platform like LogScale. So with that, I will hand it back to Cody. Again, appreciate everybody's time and attention. And that's it. I'm Mike.
Awesome, Mike and Arfan. Thank you both so much for joining us today and running through everything with us for the past 56 minutes. So it was an action-packed hour, and I really appreciate all of the work that goes into these discussions. So I would like to remind our audience that today's session was recorded. Following this program, you'll receive an email with a link to access the recording on demand, or you can find the recording living on the Security Boulevard website at securityboulevard.com/webinars. And just be sure to look in the on-demand section. It'll be waiting for you. So we do still have those 4 $25 Amazon gift cards to give out. Our winners are Cy M, Denise H, Sanmi F, and Susan W. So to our 4 winners, congratulations. Please keep an eye on your email inbox to claim that gift card. But if you do not happen to see that email, please do check your spam folder. I'd like to thank CrowdStrike for sponsoring today's program. And I'd also like to thank Techstrong Research for conducting the research that went into the pulse meter survey that was reviewed today. And to our audience, thank you so much for joining us this past hour. We really value your time, but we also value your feedback. And so as soon as we close out, a survey will pop up on your screen, and we'd really like to hear back from you. Let us know what you'd like to see in upcoming programs, or maybe just let us know what we did right today. Either way, we do hope to see you at an upcoming Techstrong Learning program. Everyone, have a great rest of your day.